Evidence of what it calls the appalling abuse of at least 1,400 children over a period of 16 years, from 1997 to 2013. It details children being raped, trafficked, beaten and sometimes doused in petrol. The inquiry says almost all the perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage. Professor Alexis Jay, a former Chief Inspector of Social Work in Scotland, said there were blatant failures by both the police and the council to stop the abuse. And she said clear evidence outlined in 3 separate reports was disbelieved, suppressed or ignored. Well, just in the last few minutes, the leader of Rotherham Council for the last decade, Roger Stone, said he is taking responsibility for what had happened and had resigned from his post. Well, the report's author, Professor Jay, gave graphic details of what she said the victims had endured.
It is hard to describe the appalling nature of the abuse the child victims suffered. They were raped by multiple perpetrators. They were trafficked to other towns and cities in the north of England. They were abducted, beaten and intimidated. There were examples of children being doused with petrol and threatened with being set alight. They were threatened with guns, made to witness brutally violent rapes and threatened they would be the next if they told anyone. Girls as young as 11 were raped by large numbers of male perpetrators. The detail of this information and the 15 pen pictures of exploited children, which we include in Chapter 5 of the report, were all taken from official records, files and minutes. And we could have described many other children whose experiences were just as awful.
Professor Alexis Jay, and she went on to say that much more still needs to be done to help the girls and boys who've been abused.
The authorities involved have a very, very great deal to answer for here. I think immediately they must ensure that those girls get the help and support they need now to enable them to live ordinary lives, if that's at all possible for them. That's not the case at the moment. They're not getting access to the kind of therapeutic help that they might need. A small number are, but there's not nearly enough support provided to help them to deal with the experiences they've had. I think their parents are rightly angry in many instances, with very good cause. And the authorities should consider very carefully what their response to those parents is now.
So the person who led that inquiry there, Professor Alexis Jay, well, after her address, we heard from the Chief Executive of Rotherham Council, Martin Kimber, and he apologised to all the children involved.
We all have a responsibility to protect our young people from these predators. But it's clear from today's report that we, the Council, and other agencies that work with us failed in that duty for a significant period of time. For this, I am deeply sorry, and I offer my sincere apologies to the young people who have suffered such horrific abuse, and also to their families for the devastation this will have caused. Today is about making sure those young people have their voices heard. Many were courageous enough to recount their horrific experiences as part of the independent inquiry to help to ensure that others who may be at risk today in Rotherham and other parts of the country can be better protected.
That was Martin Kimber, and he went on to say that he was, however, unable to hold to account any other individuals in the council.
The report covers a significant period of time. Officers in senior positions responsible for children's safeguarding services throughout the critical periods when services fell some way short of today's standards do not work for the council today. To that extent, I have not been able to identify any issues of professional practice relating to current serving officers of this council that require me to consider use of disciplinary or capability procedures. Neither is there anything that has emerged that is so clear-cut about any single individual officer that I feel able to make a referral to any professional standards board.
So that's the Chief Executive of the Council. Well, as we've been saying in the last few minutes, as soon as that report was published, the leader of the Council, who is Roger Stone, and he'd been in charge since 2003, said he was resigning with immediate effect. He issued a statement. He said the report highlighted historic failings by Rotherham Borough Council in tackling the scourge that is child exploitation. And the statement goes on to say, having considered the report, I believe it's only right that I, as leader, take responsibility on behalf of the council. Well, our correspondent Mike Sargent has been following all of this afternoon. He's in Rotherham. He's been listening to all these statements, so much of this detail, Mike. So distressing, of course. And one of the things that is so shocking here is the sheer scale.
Yes, the scale of the abuse over so many years in just one town. 1,400 victims, according to the report's author, Professor Alexis Jay, who is with me now. Nobody really expected this report would produce a number as great as that for just one town. You've spent your whole life, your career in child protection. How shocked are you by that?
Very shocked. I had no idea what the scale of this would be in advance of the work we did. And it gradually emerged, both from the council's files that we were aware of, the total number there, and the many other files and minutes of discussions about individual children that we read dating back to 1997.
Because so far, when these reports of sexual grooming and exploitation have surfaced in individual towns, they've been focused on particular cases or groups of individuals, these so-called grooming gangs, of which a small number have been prosecuted and convicted. Have we then been missing the bigger picture and the true horrific scale of this abuse, which is only now coming to light through your report?
It's difficult for me to answer that because it's not clear and nobody can say quite what the extent of child sexual exploitation is across the UK indeed and in England, because there are no means nationally of checking and comparing numbers. But I would imagine Rotherham would not be the only town where the crimes were overlooked in the late 90s and early 2000s.
So we could be waking up now to a much bigger problem than even the shocking cases we've heard in individual towns have suggested so far.
Yes, but I cannot... there's no basis for confirming that. It just seems likely.
Now, you've investigated what was going on in this town, but you've also had a glimpse inside a council. Rotherham Council in this report seems deeply dysfunctional over many years.
There are aspects of it that were extremely detrimental to addressing this issue, both at member level and at officer level.
And yet, among the officers, nobody seems to be resigning today. Nobody seems to be sacked, disciplined in any way, although the leader of the council has resigned.
Yes, indeed. And given the scale and seriousness of the issue, it seems entirely appropriate that he did.
Would it be appropriate then for others to resign?
I couldn't comment on others. The leader of the council was there from 2003, I think. So there are a range of people who have been in positions of power for shorter periods, so it's very difficult for me to say whether they should or should not.
Okay. Professor Alexis Jay, thank you very much. I'd just like to bring in Christine Empson now for a perspective from the victims, who's from Victim Support. You've been hearing some of the details in this report for the first time, as we have today. From the point of view of victims, just how disturbing is some of this information?
I think it's very disturbing. I think across the country it's a problem. But I just want to say that I think it's been very brave of victims to come forward and actually highlight the things that have happened to them. And a lot of it is historic abuse. And I think that the victims that have come forward and moving forward with the reporting is very positive for them. And I think it's been very brave of them as well.
We had that rather uncomfortable press conference here with Martin Kimber, the Chief Executive, in which he repeatedly apologised to victims. But that's not enough, is it?
Nothing can change what's happened to those victims. All they can try and do is, with all the support that's available, move on with their lives, deal with all the issues that they've experienced. It's been a horrendous crime and they need appropriate support. They need systems in place to help them and to establish them back into communities, to help them with all the trauma and get on with their lives as best they can.
Christine Empson from Victim Support, thank you very much for joining us. And questions too in that press conference about the level of support that the council was giving to those 1,400 victims who were not identified in this report, but the report suggested that that was the total number, shocking in its scale, and still no real sense of what the council is doing beyond an apology to support them on a day-to-day basis, as well, of course, as all the many questions about responsibility, about how to improve council services, and what this shocking report means for other towns and cities across the country where there have been other cases of this type of sexual exploitation and grooming.
Mike, thank you for now. Mike Sargent.